Hello. I've been away for a long while, and for a large part it's got to do with this horrible virus going around. Firstly, because I moved to be with my family and kind of got stuck there for the entirety of lockdown. And secondly, it's affected my work in a way that's made me not want to do anything to do with videos. I just want to chat a bit about this and about what's happened. So to give a brief introduction to what I do, I'm a PhD student in the UK. I study astrophysics. And more specifically, I'm in a group that designs and tests scientific instruments used for astronomy. In early March, say a few weeks before the UK went into lockdown, I was no longer allowed to enter the laboratory or any other part of the university. This is a little ramble on what I've experienced then and how it's been. But before I start, because this is a bit of a moan, it's worth mentioning that I'm lucky. This job has quite a good bit of security compared to a lot of people, especially for someone my age. COVID was shit, but I effectively got away with it far better than many did. I should make that clear before I start going on a long old rant. So to my work then. The really big thing is obvious that I don't have access to the lab. Can't get experimental data. This has been probably the biggest thing for slowing me down. You have to stop any work which relies on data that hasn't been collected. But more importantly than that, and what I think a lot of people don't realise sometimes, is that the experimental process is very much a loop of constant refinement. You have an idea, you experiment, you work out where you need to sharpen up on the theory and how you're going to design a better idea. You repeat the experiment and refine. I don't actually use the lab massively often, sometimes spending days or maybe a week or so without going in there. But months of inaccess does throw out that whole loop, which makes research a lot more difficult. The thing that I found interesting though, and by interesting I mean totally awful, is that this led me to being far worse at working in general. You see, usually I have a fairly varied work. I mix up in-person meetings and laboratory work with reading papers and doing computer simulations. Now, with months of no experimental work and all meetings being run online, which, don't get me wrong, is convenient, but what's happened to my day is that everything I do now involves sitting in front of a computer. I know many people can do that, that's basically their full-time job, but the entire reason I went into physics like this is because I enjoy the practical experimental bits, and being pushed to sit in front of a computer has really sapped my motivation. I can slog through, I can get days done, but I'm not working with the vigour I had before. It's also why I stopped doing videos for ages. As soon as I clocked out, I didn't want to spend another minute in front of a computer. Add to this that near the start of lockdown I didn't really have any simulation work to do, programming in any way, so it was almost all read papers, make notes, and I was zoning out, was completely failing to read even simple things, and getting to that point where you're stuck on the same line for about an hour. It wasn't great. So that was one bit of doom and gloom. Another thing that I sort of got away with, but which will have affected a lot of people, is the delays to major projects. You see, a lot of people who do PhDs will be doing work which runs alongside, or even perhaps be designed for particular experiments. When the experiment gets delayed, you are affected. And of course, as well as institutions, large numbers of experiments have been put on hold. Large numbers of things like, say, telescopes have stopped observing if they need people in to run them. While quite a lot of things can be automated, sometimes you just have to sit down and say, right, I've got nothing. I can't get any data in. Another thing that shut down, at least in my case, was the university's financing of goods. Not the entire university, of course, but a lot of us lost the ability to purchase parts or consumables for experimental work while most of the lockdown was on. I got away with this, but for someone who needs to order parts that had fairly long delivery times, often the first thing that they're doing after months waiting to get back in the lab is waiting again for the parts to arrive because they didn't get around to ordering them before lockdown. One last thing about the effect of lockdown that I can think of at the moment is that keeping safe working conditions has led to delays even after I got back. And this will be obvious to anyone who's been trying to work after this lockdown has been eased. Working with measures to keep distance is slower and it's less effective than working normally. I can't move freely around the labs to grab tools without working out how to keep away from other people. Any attempt to coordinate work between multiple people becomes a lot more difficult, much bigger pain in the hole. And also, even with that, I'm now not in every day because of how the groups work and how many people we can have at maximum. I'm now split to when I can be in, and we have to make arrangements at the beginning of the week. So even though I'm back in work, I'm a lot slower. That's it for my rambling. I just wanted to get out there what's been going on and how the lockdown has affected me and how it's affected my work. So I hope that was at least worth listening to in some way.